Hello everyone and welcome back to another review video. In the last one we talked about Legendia, an amusement park in southern Poland home to the highly acclaimed Lek coaster. Today we're moving onwards to Energylandia, one of the most talked about amusement parks in recent memory. Often a bucket list park for many, this place has exploded with growth over the past few years. That is exactly the reason I set off to visit the beautiful country of Poland as a part of our 7-week trip to Europe this past summer. Energylandia is located in a small town called Zator, which is basically in between the cities of Krakow and Katowice. It's a pretty remote area, so from my knowledge, there's no public transit routes heading there, although I do believe Energylandia has buses that can pick you up from either of the two cities. Probably the closest significant destination to Energylandia is Auschwitz, which really surprised me. I couldn't believe they were 25 minutes apart from one another. We drove to Energylandia with a rental car the first day and then Uber the second day, and it's a beautiful drive. When you get there, you'll immediately realize that this is a massive amusement park. You'll see the imposing Hyperion mega coaster right at the front, which makes for an amazing first impression. Now, before we get too carried away, I do want to give a brief rundown on this park's legendary reputation. Energylandia opened in 2014, not even a full decade ago, and the rate they've added new rides and roller coasters is absolutely insane. It's to my knowledge that the property was being massively funded by the European Union and Polish government because they wanted to bring an increase in tourism to Poland. And I'd like to believe the efforts paid off because Energylandia is now a destination park for roller coaster enthusiasts and theme park lovers alike. I spoke to many Poles both in person and online who said that when they were a kid there was nothing even remotely similar to Energylandia and that they were amazed it even exists in the first place. I remember like a year ago seeing an Instagram post on the park's Instagram that stated that Energylandia was one of Google's top 10 most searched for European tourist attractions in 2021, right alongside the Amalfi Coast and Colosseum and things like that. I think this place was bound to be successful from the beginning. When I went, there were so many families gathered together for a day of fun. Now, I mentioned Energylandia's rapid expansion, and I'm not kidding because they are home to 20 roller coasters as of 2024. That means at that point they will have tied Six Flags Magic Mountain for the most coasters at any one amusement park in the world. Granted, most of them are small family coasters, but they certainly do have some behemoths that we'll talk about later. When I visited the park, I sided with 2 full days because I knew there was no way one day would be enough. And I was absolutely correct. I think Energylandia is one of those places right alongside Cedar Point and Six Flags Magic Mountain where you need 2 days at least. It would just be impossible to ride everything in one day, let alone see the entire park, because there's a lot of fun stuff packed in here. Now, I say packed in like the park is small. No, Energylandia is one of the biggest amusement parks I've ever seen. It would probably take you 20 minutes to walk from one end of the park to the other. With such a massive park with so many attractions, I think it would be reasonable to assume that it would cost a lot to get in. But one of the things I was most impressed with here was the value of everything. Admission costs 179 Polish zloty for 1 day. That's about $40 US. And then what we went with is they also have a 2-day option for 319 Polish zloty or $73 US. And the value thing doesn't just go for admission, it also goes for food, beverage, and other necessities when you go to a theme park. Granted, we thought just about everywhere in Poland was affordable, but I still wouldn't blame Energylandia for wanting to charge twice the amount they do. When we got inside the park, we immediately walked to the back to get on some of the park's best attractions and stopped for a ride on Speed, their water coaster, in the meantime because it was so hot. But definitely, if you're coming here for the first time, a great strategy is to start way in the back of the park since no one else is going to be willing to walk 500 miles to get to Zadra and Abyssus first thing in the morning. What many people do is they run to Hyperion and other stuff at the front first, which is not what you want to do because those lines really empty out later in the day. When I was walking, I immediately noticed some of the park's wacky theming. There's so many colors, so many different characters, and so many rides straight from the get-go. Everything does look clean, but it is a confusing mismatch of all sorts of stuff. It isn't until you get to the back half of the park where the theming becomes more cohesive. The front and back sides of Energylandia are actually split up by a road. That's how big this place is, so you'll have to utilize an underground tunnel to get there. But right away, the theming in the back half is incredibly impressive. You're dumped right into the park's Dragon Zone, which is a cool medieval theme section that's honestly right up there with the theming found in Wizarding World of Harry Potter at the Universal Parks. It's also where I spent the most amount of time since this is where Zadra is located. Zadra is a beast of an RMC. It is actually tied with Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa as the tallest and fastest hybrid coaster in the world. Both coasters share a good amount of similarities, but I walked away liking Zadra more. The pacing of this ride is flawless, the sequence of elements is amazing, and the forces are perfect. I honestly don't think there's much they could have done to improve this coaster. It's currently one of my top 5, maybe even top 3 roller coasters I've ever been on. So if there's anything you take away from this review, let it be that Zadra alone makes a visit to Energylandia worth it. Right next door is your water-themed section called Aqualandis, and once again, this looks great. I do think there's some minor things I could have done to make it better, but I have mostly good things to say about it. The anchoring attraction here is Abyssus, which I gave the title as the most underrated roller coaster in Europe. Not that the ride doesn't have its fans, but it's unfairly compared to another Polish Vekoma coaster called called Let Coaster at nearby Legendia. Let Coaster was built to be super intense and rip your face off, but Abyssus really wasn't. That said, it still pulls a hefty amount of positive forces and is really well paced until the end. One pretty crazy experience I had while riding Abyssus was actually getting a rollback on the top hat. In other words, we'd rise halfway up and then fall backwards, which is not as the ride's intended. Now this is totally safe, so I knew not to be alarmed, but I was just amazed that it happened. It's right up there with the rollback I got on Accelerator at Knott's Berry Farm in 2019 as one of the rarest things I've ever experienced at a theme park. Also in the back section of the park is Sweet Valley. This is a new area the park will be debuting in 2023, and it will come with an additional 2 roller coasters. One of them is a Vekoma Mine Train coaster and one's a Vekoma Junior coaster. While the theming of Sweet Valley admittedly looks great, neither of these coasters were exactly needed. And that brings me to the first and really only major complaint I have with Energylandia, and that's redundancy. This park has a lot of repeat roller coasters to the point where it almost comes across as a quantity over quality sort of thing. For example, you'll find 9 kiddie coasters, or at least mild family coasters, across this park. Quite a few of these are Vekoma coasters, just with different track styles or slightly modified layouts. They even went as far as to put 2 family boomerangs here, which blows my mind. Yes, these have different layouts, but what has the park accomplished by having 2 virtually identical experiences in the same park? Likewise, they also have some pretty dull attractions here as well. The Viking roller coaster they have here is quite possibly the worst roller coaster I have ever been on. I usually try to find the good in most coasters I ride, which is why even I'd say I don't mind the redundancy here as much as most enthusiasts would. But I literally have not a single good thing to say about this Viking ride. I've also heard this place has some pretty bad dark rides as well. Before we move on to another topic, I will lighten the mood by shouting out a few other coasters that stood out to me. Hyperion, which I mentioned earlier, is a huge Intamin hypercoaster. It's actually the second tallest roller coaster in Europe, standing at 269 feet tall, and guys, this thing is amazing. Like, talk about a 1-2 punch. Between this and Zadra, this has to be one of the best top 2s in the world. Also, Formula is a great one. That attraction got a lot of notoriety for being the first new generation Vekoma thrill coaster to open worldwide. It's essentially like a toned down version of Abyssus, really fun. Dragon is also a great family attraction as well. Other than that, I didn't ride any of the flat rides since they all seemed pretty unoriginal, but that doesn't mean they're bad. I noticed a pretty sweet looking booster ride and a pendulum, which I'm sure are great. Now moving on from the rides, I want to talk about some of the other strong facets about the park itself. First, I think Energylandia has some of the best operations in the world. They were so on top of their dispatches, which is why I barely had to wait for anything while I was in the park. And as I said, Energylandia was pretty busy both days I went, so it has little to do with the crowd level. I really think it could be most credited with the operations. They were consistently running multiple trains on everything and sending out a train before the other had hit the brake run. And whenever lines did seem to be getting long, they would be so on top of adding another train, so you'd hear these announcements saying the ride will be experiencing a temporary pause in operation, so a train can be added. If a Six Flags park did that, which sounds like a fantasy in itself, there's no way they'd announce it to guests. The ride-ups would probably tell people the ride was broken because they're so out of touch with the reality. Damn, I just roasted the hell out of Six Flags, didn't I? Another thing Energylandia thrives in is food, and honest to God, I could not believe how delicious the food here was. I wasn't able to try any Polish staples like pierogies here. I hear those are also great, but of all the things I did eat, here's the thing you absolutely need to try. Right across from Abyssus, there is this eatery, not even a traditional sit-down restaurant, that serves some of the greatest ramen I have ever had. I was eating the most awesome Japanese cuisine at an amusement park in Poland. Someone explain to me how that makes any sense. Some other minor things and quirks I want to mention are as follows. If you decide to wait for the front row of Zadra or Hyperion, they'll make you wear goggles for some reason. I mean, obviously this is to protect your eyes from bugs or debris or something, but why did they mandate that on Abyssus and Formula? Between you and I would just wait until I was on the lift hill to take the goggles off, because look, if I can ride Iron Gwazi and literally any other coaster in Europe without goggles, I think I'll be fine. Another odd thing I saw was when I was trying to rack up coaster credits at some of these smaller rides, the ride operators would literally be on their phone texting while the ride is going. I only saw this a handful of times, but it just stood out to me since in America, eyes must be on the vehicle at all times. But I don't even really consider this a bad thing. I mean, it can be if it's for a safety reason, but I feel like the park is just laid back. All the staff seemed really chilled out. Now, I mentioned in my Legendia review how the language barrier in Poland can be a little bit of a struggle sometimes. From my experience, lots of staff working here spoke decent English, but lots of staff also didn't. It wasn't like at Legendia where I'd say a majority can keep up in a conversation. That said, the ones I did talk to were super friendly, including this guy who worked at this flatbread stand who we must have talked to for like 30 minutes straight. It was pretty cool. Last thing I'll mention, for any of my YouTubers out there, Energylandia is one of those awesome places that will allow you to record on ride with a chest-mounted GoPro. All you have to do is get it approved in the front of the park where they'll check and make sure it's secure, and then they'll give you a sticker that's still on my chest mount to this day. I consider that to be a fun little souvenir or reminder of the park whenever I'm out filming at other places. To just kind of wrap things up, I had a genuinely outstanding 2 days at Energylandia. So much so that I'll be giving the park a 9.5 out of 10. I'd say it's on the lower end of a 9.5 since I do wish the redundancy issue was improved upon, and it would be nice if they updated the theming in the front half. But everything else I saw was an absolute win in my book. Energylandia is a park that seems to care a lot about the guest experience. Between the rides, staff, food, cleanliness, and new themed sections, this is a park that all roller coaster enthusiasts and theme park lovers should visit at some point in their lives. In my opinion, it's worth a visit to Poland alone to check this place out. Then when you factor in Legendia so you can get on Let Coaster and some of the sightseeing in the glorious cities of Poland, it is a must-visit country. I was completely blown away across my several days in Poland, and I know I'll be back for a revisit at some point in the future. To all my Poles watching this, keep your country looking beautiful, and to everyone else, thank you for watching my Energylandia review video. If you enjoyed, feel free to give me a like and subscribe to Coaster Dash for more content like this in the future. Leave a comment if you've been to Energylandia, what you think of it, or if it's on your bucket list. Until next time, I'll see you all very soon. Bye guys.